keep in mind that there's coffee, donuts, tea, juice, all those good things, and you can bring them in here. And I think that's it. And let's introduce our first speaker. I'd like to introduce to you Debbie Gordan. Debbie, who will be speaking on the fundamentals of leadership, mastering leadership skills in any position. Debbie is the founder and CEO of S3 Asset Management and S3 Consulting. S3 works with healthcare and commercial businesses to help them generate additional revenue by turning certain cost centers into profit centers. That's good. I know they love that. Profit is a great word. As director on the Regional Council and past president of the Entrepreneurs Organization, Debbie is committed to helping entrepreneurs learn and grow. She also consults and speaks on entrepreneurship, operations, business growth, and leadership. Please help me by welcoming Debbie Gordan to the stage.
Thank you, Tamara. Can everyone hear me? All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to not trip on this massive course here. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the National Business Journal and to Lipscomb University for hosting this. You guys are all here for one reason. You want to enhance your leadership skills. How many of you are currently leaders in your role? Who is not? Okay, the few people who raise their hands, we're going to change that by the end of this course here today. As Tamara mentioned, I speak a lot on entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur for probably, officially for about 15 years, and since I was birthed by my mother, I think I was an entrepreneur. That part came easy to me. I've learned everything kind of just by the seat of my pants on starting a business, growing a business, finance, technology, all these things. But the hardest thing I've ever had to learn is leadership. Leadership may come naturally for people, and from the outside, people thought it came naturally to me. I was always the natural leader, but it's something you have to really practice. So I really commend each of you for being here today, because it's something you have to work on, and you never really get there. You're never done. You have to always continue to work on it. So why do you think we're talking about this today? Do you think 30 years ago there would have been a seminar on leadership? And do you think it would have been such a diverse group of people? So the answer is no. What has changed is that, in my ability for you guys to see here, I'm not going to use the whiteboard, I don't think, but organizations have changed a lot. It used to be that organizations were tall. There was a man at the top, because it usually was a man. You know, the gruff person, I am the leader, I am the boss. But things have changed. Organizations have become a lot flatter, and people have the ability to lead no matter what they're doing. So whether you're a CEO, whether you're an event coordinator, whether you're a PR professional, whether you're a salesperson, you have the ability to lead in whatever you do. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's not just in your job. It's in all aspects of your life. So I'd like everyone to stand up, please. Introduce yourself to the person next to you and tell them why you're here today. Something that they were told, not your own reason for being here today, but who wants to share with me what they learned from the person that they spoke with? I need a volunteer.
Me? I actually did all the talking.
Okay. So, well, why are you here today?
I'm here today because
So first, what's your name?
My name is Austin Ray. I own a neighborhood bar concept here in Nashville. These are two of my top leaders with me, Jen and Ricardo, and we have every day try to create a culture where even the dishwasher or the bartender can be a leader and influence other people to be a part of our culture and to not only be self-directed, I guess, but to influence other people to do great things and to help us grow.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Key word Austin used is influence. No matter what you're doing, you can influence people, whether it's in your home, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your community. There's a few assumptions we're going to make today. First one is that everything we discussed today applies to everyone, no matter what your role is. This is not something where I'm going to talk about, or either of the other speakers are going to talk about an idea, and, well, it doesn't apply to me because I'm not a CEO. Or, well, this doesn't apply to me because, this isn't really part of my job. That's not true. So everything is going to apply to everybody. You are a leader no matter what your role says. Can everyone agree? Okay? Leadership can happen in all areas of your life. So if you have a pen and paper, there's a concept we're going to talk about today, and that is yourself as an individual, your business, your family, and your community. These are 4 aspects of life that we talk about. I'm part of the Entrepreneurs Organization. We have a few fellow members here, and we always look at how can we improve all aspects of our life, not just our business. And I think that applies to everybody. So as we're talking about leadership, think about how you can make an impact in all areas, not just your business. Yes, this is a National Business Journal event, but we're all humans, and we all need to have a lot of balance. And finally, you don't have to lead in everything you do. Sometimes leaders feel like they have to be on all the time in everything they do. They have to be on in the things that they choose to lead at and make the commitment to lead in. But you don't have to sign up for being the leader in everything you do. It's okay to be the person that's learning and following in certain situations. So who thinks that there is such a thing as a natural leader? So, I think people are born with traits. People can be extroverts. They can be influential. I mean, if you think about back to elementary school, there's always that person or people who were kind of the cool people, the influenced people. They got a kind of pair of sneakers. Everyone would get a pair of sneakers. They were leaders. That was pretty easy for them because they weren't really trying. It's when you get to be a leader of many and you have obligations that you have to practice. So people acquire a particular quality by constantly acting in a particular way. How many of you play golf? Are you ever done learning how to play golf? Right? You keep having to practice. You get good at one thing, and then maybe a year later you have to practice that again. Your torque or your grip, whatever it is, you have to keep practicing, and you're never done. Even people on the PGA Tour, they still have coaches. They still practice and hit 1,000 balls every week. They have to practice. So why do you want to be a leader? Think about one specific thing in your life today where you would like to enhance your leadership skills. And write that down. Just take a few seconds to do that. It can be in your work. It could be in your home. It could be in your community. It could be something to improve yourself. So what are some benefits of leadership?
It's exciting.
It's exciting. What else?
Help others grow.
Help others grow. Yes, what else?
Have impact.
Have an impact.
Create change.
Create change.
Challenging.
Challenge people. It's challenging for you, yes. I mean, for everybody. Being a leader. Create synergy. All great answers. Impact and influence. Those are things that have all types of leaders have in common. So when I was going through this, and I was asked to speak on leadership today, and I thought, oh, this is easy. You know, I can talk about all the things I've experienced. And I decided to go back and look up the definition of leadership. And it was pretty interesting because Merriam-Webster's definition of leadership and definition of to lead, the verb, and definition of leader were all really different from each other. And it was so interesting because they weren't really the act of doing one. So one of the definitions that I liked was a person followed by others. And if you think about it, they're followed. It's somebody that a leader is somebody who's followed. And if you think about political leaders, social leaders, they're followed. They may not realize they're being followed. They may not, people that are following may not realize that they're following them, but they're followed. And also to guide, to lead, to guide somebody or something along the way. One of the important responsibilities of a leader is to help other people become better leaders, which I think you mentioned there in the back. That is an obligation. We call that transformational leadership. That's when you can lead and you can influence people, but it's when you're really growing people as leaders that you transform. Think about your childhood. Think about the evolution of your life and what leadership has meant to you from the time you were born to today. Thought about this a lot, and here we have the 4 areas that I mentioned. Your personal life, yourself as a person, your business, your family, and your community. I have before and after here, and this is not, there's no demarcation of before and after in your life of when you become a leader. It's an evolution. But when you're younger, what you're working on personally, or just passively even, you might just want to have friends, right? People like to be liked. That's what you're really thinking about. I want to have friends. I'm social. And what happens after that? We grow, we mature, and then we get more into developing ourselves. How many of you, when you were 4, laid in bed at night and think, how could I be a better person?
Getting that change from my brother.
Right. In business, what are we thinking about before? Getting a job. When I graduated college, I wanted a job. I didn't really want a job, but I wanted to get a job. I wasn't thinking, how can I get a job and how can I really make an impact on the organization that I'm going to work for and influence people? I wasn't thinking about that. I just wanted to get a job. Now, impact. What can you do to make change in what you do? How many of you have kids? You guys are the most important leaders in the room. So, in terms of family, some people might want to get married. Not everybody. That might be one thing you're thinking about. But then once you have children, raising children and the influence that you have on those people. And they're going to do the same. And then finally, your community. Maybe when you're younger, you might join a club. You might just be part of your neighborhood. You might be part of a church. Then as you become a leader, you want to make your community a better place. So there's different types of leadership. And I have leadership in quotes here because not all these are really leaders. You can see how, and by the way, this was a really, really hard presentation to put together. A large percentage of us are leaders. Hopefully everybody in the room is a leader. But as you look at our population, look at the number of leaders there are. Just the number of parents. Not all parents are good leaders, but there's so many types of leaders. So condensing what about leadership and mastering leadership into 45 minutes is really, really, really hard. So I want to go over different types. So there's somebody who's an appointed leader of a small group for a common purpose. How many of you were on a, in school, were on a project team? You're put into a group of 5, 6, 7 people. You're on a team, or even in work. You have a goal. You have a project to do. There might be a leader of the group, and you're there for a common purpose. It's a small group. There's also a leader role, somebody who's an actual leader, being a leader to a large group. Here's an example of that. Maybe our president. Some people might disagree. Somebody's in a leadership role but not acting as a leader. How many people have ever worked for one of those? And then there's a thought leader. Think about what it is that you're good at and what you know about. What can you share with people to be a thought leader? Whether it's something in your business, something in your community, something that a hobby that you've taken up that you're really good at. I know somebody who is working on herself. She's really working on it, and she's not happy in what she does at work. She's just stuck. She hates her boss. Just hates going to work every day. Yet she writes a really awesome blog on running, and people read it. And she's so successful there. And so because she doesn't think she's a leader. She thinks she's just this person that goes to work every day in a crappy job, but the other side of her is a leader. So where can you lead? A lot of business owners become thought leaders. They write blogs, and it's a great way to establish credibility, not only with the general population, but with your customers and your employees. So there's also people who are in an adopted leadership role. What happens when there's a crisis, an earthquake, or a kid falls off a cliff into a pool of water? Somebody steps up and becomes a leader. Picture a small group where something happens, and there's always that person who says, well, what should we do? And then there's the person who says, I'm going to step up, and this is what we're going to do. The other day, I was down in Florida, and I was out running some errands, and I went for a late lunch at a restaurant. There was nobody else in the restaurant except the young couple sitting in the table next to me. And I was by myself. I ordered some food, and I couldn't help but eavesdropping, and I was kind of trying to figure out, oh, I wonder if they're on a date, you know, what's happening. So I'm just sitting there eating my Thai food, and I kind of gathered that they knew each other. I think the guy was friends with the girl's brother. But I heard her talking about herself. First she said to him, I never drive in the fast lane. Usually people are passing me. And then she said something about, within a minute, she said something about at work, well, she likes to kind of stay quiet. She's not as educated as everybody else, so she really never steps up and acts like the leader in situations. And I just wanted to get out of my chair and shake this girl, because it's her attitude. She's never going to step up. If she assumes she is never going to be a leader because she doesn't feel as educated or as capable as other people, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So attitude is everything. The accidental leader. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. And then finally, the leader of a defined group with conflicting purposes. This is a really, really, really hard one. It's really easy to be a leader when you're in the first one. When you're the leader of a group that has a common purpose and it's a small group. Yeah, there might be somebody who whines. There might be somebody who makes it a little difficult, somebody who might be competitive or prevent the group from making progress. But in general, it's pretty easy. It's when you get to a point where you need to lead a group where there's conflicting purposes and trying to manage that. And that's where the challenge is. So here are some people who, these are the usual suspects when you ask a group who are some leaders in today's society. Everyone know who all the people are? I hope so. Who's this? Rosa Parks, thank you. So, the last slide I had a term called the accidental leader. I'm going to come back to Gordan in a minute, though, actually. This is our accidental leader. Taylor Swift and Rosa Parks on the same slide. Who knew? Right? Rosa Parks, on her way home from work one day, decided, in Montgomery, Alabama, she was on the bus, and she decided she was not going to get up from her seat. Rosa Parks was not a highly paid executive. She was a working woman coming home from her job, and she decided, I am not going to get up from my seat today. I just don't want to, and I don't think we should have to do that. Rosa Parks died last year, and she left a legacy. People didn't know who she was that day, in 1955, I think it was. But she elicited huge civil rights actions and left a legacy. She didn't intend to do that, but she took a stand in something that was important to her. So what can you do in any part of your life to take a stand in what's important to you? Let's get to Miss Taylor Swift here. I swear, if anyone had ever asked me if I would have Taylor Swift in one of my presentations, never. But the accidental leader. I asked my boyfriend's 11-year-old daughter the other day, I said, Chloe, do you think Taylor Swift is a leader? Well, first I asked her, I said, Chloe, what do you think is a leader? What do you think she said? I don't know. That's what 11-year-olds do. And I said, well, who do you know that's a leader? And she said, my teacher? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Why is she a leader? Because she teaches? Good. And then I said, well, do you think Taylor Swift is a leader? She said, no, because every time she breaks up with somebody, she writes a song and makes $1 million. Smart girl, right? Well, this girl is a major leader. Again, it just kills me that I'm talking about her. But really, seriously though, she has such an impact on people. There are millions of little girls and little boys who look up to her, and she has to do right. She has so many more obligations than a lot of people who are paid for their leadership positions. Think about it. She makes one wrong move, and she tears people's images up. She's a role model. Look at the train wreck that Justin Bieber is today. Can't believe I just mentioned him either. But really, I mean, these are our children we're talking about, and the influence that they're getting from these people. So what are some traits of leaders? What is something that all leaders have in common? Good listeners. Solicit information. They ask.
Make decisions that affect others.
Right? Make decisions that affect others.
Vision.
They have vision. Absolutely.
Not afraid to inspire.
They're not afraid to inspire. Right. So, those are all great and correct. Leaders also have to have purpose. They have to know why they're leading. leadership as a general term, leaders have to have purpose. And when you're in a small group, you have to have purpose. They have to have a sense of humor. You know, everybody in life has got to have a sense of humor. You can't be that old stickler man at the top of that tall organization and be mean and gruff. You have to be honest and humble. True leaders are not in it for themselves. If you're doing something for the publicity, for the shine, you're not in it for the right reasons. And that's something that you get to. When I was in high school, I was the president of the Key Club. Ooh, yay, I'm a leader. That's really cool. That was nothing. But the most success I have is when I see the people that I'm leading be successful. Leaders have to be open to change. They also have to be able to be spontaneous. They have to be aware. They have to know what's going on. And they have to be real. People who are phony is so transparent. So you really have to care about what you're doing. If you don't care, don't do it. And they have to leave a legacy and make a mark. So think about what kind of mark you can leave. What is it that you can do in your business, in your family, in your community, to make a mark? And finally, good character. If you have good character, people will be committed to you and will be loyal to you. There's a lot of leaders who people will follow, but when you have good character, people buy into that and they will be committed and loyal to you. So the obligations of a leader. They have to be aware of their impact on others. Think about a person in your life from when you were a kid, or really any time in your life. A neighbor, a teacher, a parent, a relative. I'm sure each of you has a little snippet in your mind of something that was said to you one day that you just remember. Think about what that is. Something that influenced you, that somebody said to you. How many people think, if they ask that person today, if they remember that, how many people think that they would remember that? Probably very few. I have an employee who I hired about 4 years ago. His name is Rod. And I had put an ad on Craigslist for a job. And needed to hire somebody quickly. So I got all these resumes really fast for this job. And it was somebody to work in one of our warehouses selling used equipment for a hospital. And Rod was one of the people who responded to the ad, and he sent his resume in, and I looked at his resume, and the last thing on his resume was that he was an Eagle Scout. Maybe Boy Scouts in here? All the men in my family were Eagle Scouts. My father, my grandfather, my uncles, my cousins, they were all Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts. And for those of you who don't know, being an Eagle Scout is something that takes a lot of work, perseverance, and discipline. And so when I saw his resume, I didn't even look at anything else. I just saw he was an Eagle Scout and I said, I've got to hire this young man. So I called him up, and I could hear on his, just through the phone, I could hear a big smile on his face. He was just a happy, happy, happy guy. And I said, I'm going to hire you. I feel really good about this. I really didn't even test his skills or anything, but I just knew that this was going to be a really disciplined person. So his first day, we met over at the warehouse, and I said, well, why don't we go to lunch? I want you to meet one of the other people you're going to be working with. So the warehouse is down off of Lafayette. And so we were over there, and then we were going to go downtown for lunch. So we were in the car, and we were crossing over Lafayette, and he pointed down the road, and he said, I grew up down there. And I said, where'd you grow up? And he said, in J.C. Napier Homes. And I said, wow, really? Fascinating. This kid had graduated from college. He was married, drove a minivan, and he had grown up in J.C. Napier Homes. He was the definition of an at-risk child. And I just wanted to know more. So we got to lunch, and I said, he ordered his food, and I said, Rod, tell me more about growing up. You know, tell me more about how you became a Boy Scout. And if you grew up in public housing and became a Boy Scout, how did that happen? And he said, well, this man, Mr. Churchwell, came over one day, and he came over to our neighborhood, and he was trying to recruit boys to be in the Boy Scouts. And I said, really? And so, how many went? And he said, 2. And he was one of them. And I said, well, what happened to the other one? He said, well, he didn't stay in. And I said, you were the one person that joined the Boy Scouts from your neighborhood, and you stayed in it all the way up to being an Eagle Scout. And he said, yep. And he's always got these big dimples and a big smile on his face, and they never go away. He's always so happy to be where he is. And I said, gosh. You know. And he said, yeah, all the people I grew up with are all, you know, with my friends, they're in jail. The drug dealers, the parents of 5 kids. And I said, how did you make it? He goes, Mr. Churchwell. He gave me an opportunity. And I just couldn't believe it. You know, and I just, in looking at this young man, thinking, he beat the odds because one person came in, not only gave him the opportunity, but he took the opportunity, and his life has changed. I found out yesterday, because I called Rod and I said, what's the name of the man who came and recruited you to the Boy Scouts? And he said, Mr. Churchwell. And I said, didn't you say he had something to do with the Nashville Banner? And he said, yeah, his father was the first African-American journalist in Tennessee. So see how that passes down? The father raised a man who went to recruit Rod to the Boy Scouts. His father was Mr. Churchwell, when I came and recruited Rod, was the scoutmaster. And he went the extra mile. He could have just been a scoutmaster. He could have set up a table at school to try to recruit people, start with the Cub Scouts. But what did he do? He went the extra mile, and he went and he tried to find people who wouldn't likely sign up for the Boy Scouts to try to make a difference. And he made a difference. And if it's just one person that you can impact, look at what happens. So I have the responsibility now of Rod and making sure that he continues his path. And I will tell you that nothing in my career has been as fulfilling as watching him and helping him. He tried to quit one day. He had made a $5,000 mistake. And I said, what did you learn from this? And he told me. He told me why he won't do it again. And then he called me back a few minutes later. He goes, I think Taylor should have this job. Taylor's a guy that works with him. And I said, what are you talking about? Are you quitting? And he said, yeah, I just don't think I should do it anymore. I can't make mistakes like that. I said, you are not quitting your job. I said, do you really want to quit? He said, no. And I said, then you're not quitting, because if you quit, I can't finish what I'm doing. I've worked so hard to work with him and grow him. He can't quit. So it's a responsibility. It's something to take very seriously, and it can be extremely fulfilling. So I've been a leader in many different capacities. Being a leader, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in a small group with a common purpose is really easy. A lot of times people who are leaders think that it's a matter of keeping everybody happy, right? You lead, you keep everyone happy, you get the job done. Versus this, knowing you're not going to keep everyone happy, but knowing you're doing the right thing for the mission you have set out to accomplish. That's when it's really, really, really hard. And it's something that you have to plan for. Leadership can be lonely. You know, not everyone's going to like you. Think about it. Look at our president. Look at past presidents. Not everyone likes the president, but they're in the job and they sign up for that. So you have to sign up. If you're going to be a true breakthrough leader, you have to sign up for the fact that you're not going to please everyone all the time. But if you have a mission, and if you know that that mission has a purpose, and the people are willing to follow it, even though it's not everybody, then you're doing the right thing. So this is kind of a silly question. I put this on here, and it should have been probably more in the beginning of his presentations, but used to be there was, you know, one main leader. We talked about the gruff man. And I mentioned that organizations are getting flatter. And so more people in an organization have the ability to make decisions and to have an impact on what's going on in the organization. Has anyone ever done any business in Asia or studied the Asian business culture? Somebody in the back. Can you share? No? Okay. no, don't call on me. So I learned a lot beginning about 5 years ago about Asian, in Japan specifically. The business culture is a little different there. And it's interesting because back in the 1930s, any of you ever heard of Matsushita Electric? So it's a big Japanese company. And the owner of it, Mr. Matsushita, had some really interesting and kind of before their time views on how business should be conducted in Japanese companies. And there were things that we're seeing now in our culture. And one of the things that they do is they actually look down for decisions. So there's a term called harensu. And in Japanese business, it means collaboration and approval. So decisions are actually proposed from the bottom, brought up, and there's people put a little, they get passed around in a proposal to different people, and they put their signature in a symbol, either up for approval or sideways for disapproval. And then it goes up to the manager, and the manager either approves it or disapproves it. And if they approve it, the person that proposed it actually implements it. And if they disapprove it, the person that proposed it can tweak it, and then they can go through the same process. One thing that I implemented in my business years ago was that I wanted everybody to have the ability to do that. There's a lot of people that get hired in a company, and they have no idea what's going on there. They just do their job. They just work there, right? How many of you have heard, I just work there, or I just work here? It's not my job, right? You have to encourage people in your business to be more than just somebody who works there. So creating a culture of openness and innovation, giving people the opportunity to lead and make changes. So we can take a lot from the Japanese. So in this sense, yes, a group can have more than one leader, and they should. So as organizations are getting more flat, there's lots and lots of leaders. Even in a small group, when there's a designated leader, there's the opportunity for each person to be a leader. I'm getting the time is up. I'm going to give you a couple of things to take away here. And then you're going to hear from two great speakers, Tim Earnhardt and Derek Young, afterwards. But a couple of things you can take away. So leadership is not about titles, positions, or flow charts. It's about influencing one another. So come back to yourself, your business, your community, and your family. How can you influence a person, a group of people, a community? How can you influence people in all of these areas? So some of you may feel overwhelmed, and this is, this isn't something I can accomplish tomorrow. Pick somebody in your life that you've witnessed that you want to emulate. This helps in sports. When you're practicing sports, you can say, I want to hit like Tiger Woods. But think about somebody who's a great leader. And when you're making decisions, think, what would that person do? Sometimes, maybe it's a spiritual leader. Sometimes it's a person in your business. Sometimes it's a relative. Think to that person too if you're ever conflicted by the decisions you want to make. So, a couple of little tactical things in being a leader, and then I'm going to wrap up. Little things you can do in interacting with people. First of all, gossiping. Don't gossip. Think and speak positively about people. Today when you go back to the office, commend somebody. Commend somebody not only to their face, but commend somebody to somebody else. Identify something that can be done better and bring it up. Do something about it. Don't just take it. Look what Rosa Parks did. Not going to take it anymore. So speak up. Nobody will ever fault you for speaking up. And do the right thing. We're often conflicted by doing the right thing, especially in positions where we're trying to please a lot of people. And I know that when I've had decisions that I've had to make and I felt conflicted, knowing there's got to be a right decision, there's got to be a right decision. And I think, what is the right thing to do? If I couldn't get there initially, it was because something was blocking me. It was fear. It was that I hadn't been completely open with everybody. But once I was, the right decision was really easy to make. So always do the right thing. Answer that question when you're conflicted or when you're making decisions. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. This is a big step for everyone. Like I said, being a leader is a lot of work. You have to practice. Make a plan for yourself. How are you going to continue on this path to leadership? Today is just the beginning of it. You have a lot of things that you can do, a lot of learning. So take it seriously, make a plan, and continue to work on yourselves in the community. Thank you.
Derek Young, who's back there talking with Tim Earnhardt. Well, guys and ladies, I just want to take this time to say thank you so much for taking this time out of your day and coming to spend it with us. It's been some great things shared. It's like, how fast can I write? I was kind of like writing notes on here, trying to write notes in my phone so that I can send them to my daughter because I'm still trying to keep her motivated and all of that good stuff. So I really do appreciate you guys taking the time out, and I hope that you guys got something from the discussions and the presenters as well. So now it's time for our question and answer period, and as I told you, it's kind of informal. So if you guys have any questions, please just hold your hand up and shout it out. Is that a song? Shout.
You just wrote it.
Okay, that's it. Any questions starting off?
I have a question, particularly for Derek. I'm interested in your go-to resources.
Couple quick ones. My favorite business book of all time is the Bible, Book of Proverbs. Second is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I would teach that in the school system. I have 8 mentors, and I find that somebody led us to believe that the older and the more responsibility you have, the less you should be mentored, and it's just the opposite, because you have more to lose. So I have mentors who have helped me a lot. And a new resource I found that helps a lot of my clients is a book called Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. And in my mind, it's a book that gives you a way to tell stories in your process of moving an initiative forward.
My question is for Derek as well. A lot of what you talked about, knowing that upline requires close proximity and relationship with them. How do you build that relationship with you?
Yeah, you know, my thought is, there's a couple things, is whatever your upline is writing, blogging, putting in newsletters, be an expert on that. Whoever has close proximity to that upline that you may be able to access, learn sort of through their experience. I think the other thing too is, you'll see in many organizations, whether it's banking, like I know Harry's in, or some other field, you'll see, and Tim mentioned it, social service activities that person might be, if they're a board member for the YMCA, if they're a board member for the symphony. Find how you might be able to engage around that component of their life and be a part of their vision and their process and their thought, their thinking around that initiative. And again, it's a great way to get, quote unquote, closer to them, to see how they really think up close and personal.
I have a question for Tim. We were talking about getting involved in charities and organizations and serving on boards, and from where I sit as a female and also as a black female, it's a little bit difficult for women to serve on corporate boards as well as black women serving on corporate boards. Do you have any suggestions on how to maybe get your foot into the door to do just that? Because there's a study that's been done about women specifically on corporate boards and the lack of. So if you can just give us your views on that, please.
And I can actually have Laura, I think, in some ways vouch for me on this, since she was with the local junior achievement organization for a number of years before she went to the national organization. When I served in different executive capacities and even as chairman of the board, as we talked each year about new names to be brought onto the board, I was always a proponent for, we need more women on the board, period. I hated to look around the room and see 25 to 30 board members and 3 were women. And so I've always been a big proponent for that, because we need that balance. The guys around the room don't always know everything, and it's nice to have that perspective. There are a lot of very smart women who are even here today, and so I've always been a big proponent of that. And I'm always looking for who is that next individual in my community that I can recommend to be on the board. So it comes back, in my opinion, to networking, getting to know the people of influence in the community, so that when a board is considering a name to be nominated, they're thinking of your name. And the only way you will get to that point is if you involve yourself in the community in other ways. Because if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So I would encourage you to be involved in the community in general, and then you will be viewed as someone of leadership, and when names are thrown around nomination time, your name will come up.
I can add one thing.
I was just going to ask you a question about that, because, and panelists, please feel free, if we call out just a name, please know that I like for the panelists, there are different views, and sometimes you want to hear all of the views to make sure you know what works best for you. So please feel free to chime in. And I wanted to talk to you, so I'm glad to hear you speak up about this. So go ahead and let's see if you answer my question on that.
Well, I would just say, for somebody who wants to be on a board, raise your hand and say you want to be on a board. Because most boards need people who are committed. I mean, there's people that are a dime a dozen that want to just stick it on their resume that they're on 6 boards. But if you just tell somebody you want to be on that board, you're going to be a lot more qualified than somebody who people know and they're the usual suspects in the community to be on that board, and you'll probably be a lot more effective.
As mentors, when you're mentoring, do you take that mentee with you to some of your board meetings and introduce them? Because as I hear Derek, young, old, even being old, I tell a story, you know, I'm mentored by the young just as well as the old, because I think that the minute that you cannot be, that's when you're unteachable or unable to be coached. do you take that person to those board meetings with you to introduce them to that surrounding, to show them about it's beyond just being a leader, it is being on this board and giving back? Is that where it starts?
I don't necessarily take them to board meetings just because of the maybe appropriateness of it in a board meeting. A lot of times they're closed, but I actually bring a lot of my employees to different events that I go to. Unfortunately, we had a big thing at work today and nobody could come to this, otherwise I would have had some people here. But exposing them to your life, you know, exposing people to what it is that you do outside of the office is really important, so they can see that there's a lot of balance and that you're involved in other things.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and this is true for men and women, but again, we find a lot of our clients are women. And 3 suggestions I would make is be very clear on what your unique specialty is. So rather than say, I'm good at marketing, say, I'm good at helping turn around an organization or division's image in the community, right? Rather than say, I'm good at accounting, say, we're very good at doing gap analysis for certain entities. And what I find is on for-profit boards, you'll find that a lot of times people really are looking for a more finite skill set. Secondly, I would recommend that you've got to build relationships with people who influence people on the board. Because more often than not, the board sits back and says, okay, we're looking for a woman. We're ready to find a woman. Boards make their minds up finally. Well, they typically are saying that because they don't know who to call. But if you know people who have access to an organization or an industry where you may have interest, again, those pre-established relationships will be strong. Last thing I would recommend is to make sure that if you're interested in being on a for-profit board, make sure you can speak the language of the CFO. If you're talking about the healthcare industry, you better be able to talk with a healthcare CFO. If you're talking about, again, banking or finance, if you're talking about manufacturing, and again, that's whether you're male or female, but specifically I find that's something that has helped a lot of our women clients.
And also, there is a nonprofit organization dedicated to getting women on corporate boards. I can't remember the name of it right now, but they've seen the need. They're probably the ones who put out the study on the lack of. Cable is one of them, but there's I don't know, there's also another one, but yeah, Cable, and I think Kathy, you've been involved in Cable. Yeah, yeah, there are a lot of initiatives, so you don't have to go seek out those boards necessarily. You can go through these organizations, talk about your skill sets and where you might be a good fit.
I'm going to here, and then I'll come back.
Okay. My question is, speaking of boards, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting companies up and I read the book, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, and he stresses about the who before the what, where it's more, sometimes it's more important about getting the right fit from a personal standpoint, more so than the skill set. And as a starter, when you're starting up a company and you want to put like an advisory board together or build a board, what's some advice you have as far as trying to build that board? Do you seek out people that may have that finite skill set, or do you seek out someone that may be looking to get to a board and may have some skills, other skills that may not be directly in line with what you're looking at that point in time?
Well, just from my experience, building a board, an advisory board, or a board of directors for a business should serve a purpose, specifically in skill sets. And the one piece of advice that I would share in doing that is get people that are smarter than you and have completely different skill sets than you. You don't want to hire or to bring on clones to be your advisors and your directors. So look for skill sets. Now back to Jim Collins in Good to Great. You talked about the who before the what. And to elaborate on that, a lot of that is knowing somebody can learn. It's not necessarily, and this I think applies more to hiring people, is that when you're hiring people, there's really awesome people who can learn anything, and then there's people who may have a specific skill set. The awesome person who can learn anything is going to be a much better employee.
A couple of thoughts on boards that I've just seen. And I totally agree with what she just said. And I would maybe think about 5 or 6 positions. 1, whose presence on your board gives your company credibility? 2, whose presence on your board gives you access to capital? 3, whose presence on your board prepares you to deal with negative, sticky, nasty PR situations? 4, whose presence on your board gives you an expert in the field where you are? 5, whose presence on your board gives you a person you can trust with the craziness of being the head of that organization? 6, whose presence on that board helps you maintain the band around that board, right? Sort of someone who's a good leader. And then the next one will be who can give good legal advice. That'd be kind of how I might frame it up.
He's done this before.
Yeah.
It's a good answer. I'll just say what he said.
Me too.
You guys are obviously very busy, have multiple organizations you're a part of, with either being an entrepreneur or things that you serve on. And Tim talked about it a little bit with the work-life balance, but I'd like to hear it from each of you. As you're younger and you're trying to really further your career and advance, you feel like it really has to all be focused in work and in your career. And it just seems like it engulfs your time, and you tend to let things, or let me speak to myself, I tend to let other things, family and other things that are important, God, my faith, and those things take second. So I'd like to hear how you've been able to do that and get to where you are, and just maybe some advice or tidbits on that.
You know, one of the things that I was blessed with, I had a unique environment where I married the boss's daughter. Actually, I went to work for the company, and that's where I met my wife, because she was working for her dad while she was in college part-time. And my father-in-law was at a point in his career where he was ready to kind of back off from some of the involvement in the community, sitting on different boards. And so he was willing to say, you know what, I'm going to step off of this board, but I would recommend my son-in-law to come on and represent the company. And so I had that benefit. So I was encouraged by my boss to get involved in the community and on these different organizations and boards. So, you know, it was just as important to him and to the, I guess, the presence of the company to have me involved in the community, and then also be focused on my day-to-day work. So I was benefited by that. And I got involved too much early on, and then realized as I got older, you can only do so much effectively. I would rather, like today, hand-pick just a couple of organizations to really give my time to, than to say, you know, I'm on 6, because you can't, I don't think, effectively serve and give of your time to 6 groups or 4 groups for that matter. So.
You can go.
I think work-life balance is a misnomer. I don't even think that's realistic. I think what it is quality relationships. So whether you're balanced is, in my mind, irrelevant if your relationships stink. So what do I have to do to maintain a good relationship with my Lord, with my wife, with my kids, with my boss, with my community? So from that standpoint, I think people are looking for balance, but I don't know if it's balance we need. I think we need effectiveness. So that might be maybe a way to reframe that. Secondly, I found something I learned the hard way, and it's a long concept, but if you take a break before you need a break, you'll probably never need a break. Most people take a break when they're exhausted. They never get the benefit of it. James Dobson, many of you may have heard, ministry out of Colorado. He's the first person I ever heard say it. On your deathbed, you're probably not going to say, I could have worked at the office more. When I traveled the country for Dollar General, I had a habit. Whenever I sat on a plane next to a man older than myself, I asked him one question. If you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do? Every man I ever asked that question, I would say I'd spend more time with my kids. The other thing I would tell you, 2 more, and I'll just be quick. One is involve your family in your work. And I don't mean dump all the negative stuff on them. Let them know. My kids every morning, Dad, what's on your agenda today? And I say, hey son, I got a presentation over at Lipscomb. What tips do you have? Get them involved and active in what you're trying to achieve. And then last but not least, When you are spending time with your family, let them know you are choosing to spend time with them because it's something you want to do because you love them.
So, as an entrepreneur, work, family, and myself, there's really no demarcation. I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and that's the one thing we all struggle with is balance, because there's no 9 to 5 as an entrepreneur. You know, we don't stop. It's our life. We dream about it. We think about it. It's our personalities. It's our risk levels. It's how we handle situations in all parts of our lives. And so balance, for me, has really been just to identify what's important to me, because business is really important to me because, and it used to be to fulfill my vision. And my vision when I was a kid was to be a businesswoman. I didn't know what that was. I just was in a big office in a suit and I was a businesswoman. I didn't know what that was. And now it's about helping people, and it's really changed. So my balance is making sure that I'm fulfilling my own mission and vision. And I encourage each of you to make a mission statement, a personal mission statement. List your values, what's important to you. And whenever you have big decisions or small decisions to make, check back that those decisions are aligned with your values.
I want to piggyback real quick. I love what she just said. I would recommend also have a mission and vision for your family, a mission and vision for yourself, and then have a separate mission and vision for your business or career. I worked for Fortune 500, I told y'all Dollar General for 7 years, moved into a new home on Thursday, 911, the planes hit the building on Tuesday. Wednesday, they said, Derek, you're a great guy, we love you, you helped put us on the map, but you gotta go, brother. And if my career had been my primary mission, it would have been real bad around Nashville. So I just would strongly echo what she just said.
And whereas this is not about me, but I will piggyback on that as well. When you create those statements, revisit them. Don't just write them down on a piece of paper to say that you've done them. You've got to revisit them. I do one for my family. I don't just do it. We sit down and we discuss, what do we want our scripture to be for the year? What do we want to look at to use as our motivation for the year? And that's in a place in our home where we can always see it. And when there are things going wrong, well, did we have this into the equation? As well as with myself, I keep one right there for myself so that I can see it. You have goals for yourself. Your company has goals for you. Your goals, chances are, should and probably do outstretch those of what your company wants you to do, and that's a good place to start. But you got to be able to see them and revisit them, because if you're not visiting them, you should have never written them down. Any more questions?
And one more thing on that, don't answer the question of what do you want to do, but why do you want to do it? Why? Why do you want to be who you are? Why do you want to do what you want to do in your business or in your community or for yourself?
I've had mentors very informally in my career, but to take it toward the next level of actually kind of establishing, okay, I'd like you to be my mentor. What are some good things to do? What are some activities? How do I do that? What does that relationship look like? Both, and if you could speak to what you've done as the mentor, and so how your relationships have worked with the people who've mentored you versus how they work with the people, or what you want of the people who are your mentees, if you will.
For me, what I've done, I guess, over the last 5 or so years, there was a point where I didn't feel like I was mentor level quality. I felt like I needed to experience more and then be able to give back. From a college student standpoint, a lot of them, I just did this yesterday over coffee. A young lady is graduating this coming May, and she's had put her resume together. and she's graduating with a similar degree that I got from Western, and really just wanted to spend 30, 45 minutes having me review her resume, give her some tips on the kinds of questions she should be asking. That's a very insightful young lady who knows she's going to get asked a lot of questions, but for her to want to be prepared going in with questions for that potential employer, I think was very insightful and smart. So I do a lot of that, reviewing portfolios from a creative perspective as well as resumes. And then young people or young professionals, as I've mentored those, you know, it's just really letting them ask anything they want. It's amazing when you sort of allow yourself to just be an open question, then they ask some really good questions. And I'm not ever afraid to talk about my faults as much as my success, because it's really the things that I've done wrong and the things that I've failed at that have taught me really who I am and have made me who I am. And so, you know, I love, as I've said earlier, I love young people, and so it's hard for me to say no to somebody who wants to be mentored. I spoke on the MTSU campus last fall, and a young lady actually was a non-traditional student. She had already graduated, was getting her MBA, and was working in a career, and she emailed me after that session and said, I know this is going to sound odd, but would you be my mentor? And I know I live in Murfreesboro and you live in Bowling Green, but maybe it's a once every month, every other month phone call, or just if I have a question, can I email you? Well, I think all of us would feel pretty good if somebody reached out and said, hey, you look like somebody that has it together. Could you be my mentor? I think all of us would enjoy that, right? And so why not? And so it definitely has been something I've even benefited from, probably more so than the young people.
My advice to folks is a little bit different, same vein, or maybe a little different, is that don't ask for a mentor, ask for mentoring. And if you call me and I call you back and I help you, and you call me again and I call you back and I help you, and you call me and I call you back and I help you, and you call me and I call you back and I help you, I'm your mentor. And I think it's a little bit tricky sometimes when you ask somebody, will you be my mentor? People hear dozens of cups of coffee, they hear their schedule, but if you ask me a question and I respond and you like my response, so that's what I would suggest there. On the other side of being a mentor, I like people who are hungry. Know-it-all people are not attractive to me. People who are hungry. Two, people who give me an update on what I let them know. Because I didn't let them know because I didn't have anything else to do. I let them know because I cared about their success. So I want to know how they're doing. Three, people who bring something to the mentoring relationship. When they hear me talking, when they hear, as Tim said, my issues, they say, hey, Derek, you know, my uncle, my friend. So when it's a reciprocating relationship, that just elevates my interest in helping them get where they want to go.
A couple of things, and by the way, I totally agree with you. I don't think mentoring is something that you're not a mentor, you become one. You don't say to somebody, hey, will you be my boyfriend? They become your boyfriend, or girlfriend, or whatever. It just happens. And the one thing that's so hard to do as a mentor, or a coach, or just an inspirer, is to let people fail. So many people, especially in the young generation right now, they don't know how to fail. They all get trophies. It's just, people don't, right? And people have to know how to fail. Now, obviously, you want to pick and choose where you're going to let them fail. You don't want to drain their bank account by having them making a huge financial mistake. But let them fail. The second thing is, don't tell them what to do. Ask them how they're going to do it. Whenever somebody asks me, Debbie, how should I handle this? I say, how do you think you should handle it? And chances are they know the right answer. They're just afraid to make that decision. So empower them to make their own decisions, but be there to hold their hand and say, well, here's my experience with that. I've tried that, and that's a great idea, but here's why it didn't work, and maybe then that'll encourage another idea for them. But allow them to make their own decisions, and also, I think you mentioned hold them accountable. They have a job to do. If you're going to invest your time, they have a job to do too.
I have a question.
question. I know we've all been talking about mentorship, but then there's also, it's important to also have a sponsor. And I wanted to know from each of you guys on the panel if you've had that relationship and if that's helped you, and how have you managed the mentor differently than the sponsor in trying to help you excel to that next level in your career?
I just had this conversation with somebody 2 days ago. And I just like giving nuance because I think it helps paint the picture. This is a 37-year-old male, 2 languages, master's degree, sharp as a tack, Fortune 100, blah, 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 blah. And was asking the question, why am I not advancing? And I said, I felt like James Kirk, you don't have a sponsor, right? And the point you're making is very key. The weird thing I've seen about sponsorships is they rarely are created by the sponsoree. Rarely have I ever seen them happen that way. The person who changed my life was my mentor and sponsor at Dollar General. And I was introduced to him by someone. So, that being said, once you get an idea, I think, of where you think you want to go in the organization, I think you have to say to yourself, who would be an ideal sponsor just based on their position and their influence, one. Then secondly, what is the likelihood I might ever have a connection with that person? And if it's not clear to you, then I think you have to say from a relationship standpoint, what are the relationships I can create that would lead me to that connection so that person can see why sponsoring me would be a great thing, right? So again, I think the beauty is you leverage your mentorship relationships to get to the sponsorship. But it's rare in my experience that I've ever seen someone just sit down and decide I want to be sponsored by somebody, especially when you're in a really big organization like I know you are.
I'm sorry, what's the difference between a sponsorship and mentorship?
From my vantage point, a mentor is someone who is again giving you ideas, information, insight on where you want to go. A mentor and sponsor can be one and the same, but based on our question, she was differentiating. A sponsor is the person who puts you in the position you want to be in, who covers you once you're in that position, and who guides you to leverage that position. And that's how I would define the difference between the two.
Is one better than the other?
You know, in my mind, I don't know if one is better than the other, but if I had to pick one, I would pick a sponsor. Because again, that covering is the key thing that differentiates the sponsor from the mentor. This is the person who's putting you there, they're checking on you, they're checking on the people around you, they're getting intel about your progress because, again, their reputation is on the line as well as your reputation. So in that regards, I would say the sponsor is probably a little bit higher up on the list.
Well, I have a question here that came, is that, Derek, it was to you. What are your thoughts about, when we're talking about, that upline, what are your thoughts about going for something that the upline is against? And part two to that is, how do we know when to go for it? You know they're against it, do you go for it, or when do you back down?
And that's deep. If there's anything that will challenge your maturity, it's these type situations. And I remember somebody was talking to me once, they said, man, when do you sleep? I said, you know, when you're in a big organization and you're trying to move big rocks up a really steep hill, sleep is not something you're always going to be able to get a lot of. Because it takes so much time to develop relationships with people. Trusting relationships where when they give you information, you can rely on it. So that being said, when you've got something that is burning, you can see it's going to be good, you can see it's going to be great, but your upline is not about it. You've got to, in my experience, find somebody else who has the ability to convince that upline. Because if you don't have it, you've got to say to yourself, how can I make this palatable to someone else who has the influence with them that I don't? And how can I interact, partner with that person, that department, that group in such a way that this message, this concept, this idea can be presented in terms, in spaces. And I'm not a golfer. I love golf, but I don't play. So I had an initiative that was pretty big. It was not budgeted. It was a couple $100,000. My boss and my boss's boss, they did not want to do it. But there was a gentleman who played golf with one of the senior leaders I was trying to influence. So I started getting to know him a little bit. And I found a way to present the idea that I had never thought of because he was their golf buddy. And the old thing, what's that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and my favorite scene when she says, Chula, you must understand, the man is the head, but the wife is the neck. You know that scene, right? And that's how you have to pursue it even in leadership roles, I think, when you're trying to make something happen when the boss just doesn't want to do it.
Any more questions? I have a, of course I have another question. When we talk about mentorship and leadership, and it is that giving back, is it, how do you approach if you're in a company and you want to take that time off? You know, some companies can take that time off and go and be a part of a community or be a part of an organization in which they want to give back. And I'm a firm believer, when you're passionate about a particular board or organization, you're more apt to be more involved. As Tim says, you know, money is least important. I think money is important in all areas, but you tend to be more passionate about those that you're wanting to give your time to, and which will create that avenue for giving back money. So how could you, with where you work, approach that company about becoming more involved, whether that is as a work team or taking that time off to give back, because we should all want to be a little...
Speak as an employer, and when my employees have come to me in the past saying we'd like to go build a house or take some time off, even training for a run, taking some extra time to do that, I encourage it, because all that stuff is going to bring balance. It's part of the culture that I want to have in my business. It's doing a good thing, and it encourages balance as well. So I think for people who want to do that in their business, sometimes they just have to say to the people that make the decisions, this is something that I want to do and it's important to me.
Is that one of those things, Derek, as with what she's saying, because that's my thought process as well, but in knowing that upline, if you know that boss or that leader is not going to agree with that, do you not back down and still plunge forward?
I think you have to decide again what's the trade-off, and it may be something you say, you know, I just need to do this on the weekend. This may be something I need to push into my own full time, and especially if you can't show how this, again, being socially responsible this way sometimes provides great image building, great marketing, great customer development. So if you can't show, if you got somebody who just adamantly no, and you can't prove a business benefit, then my suggestion is that's a personal time commitment.
You know, one of the biggest values I got is just the time you can spend with people too. My assistant and I, and Kathy, you knew, Melissa, we used to run together, and we trained for a half marathon together, and that was amazing. You know, whether it's a nonprofit event or just something outside the office, do something together, and it just really builds bonding outside of what you're doing in business.
For me, I always wanted to create a culture at workshop that I would want to get up and go to every day. So in creating that culture, if it's a culture of me taking time out of my day to be involved in certain organizations or events, then I wanted to offer that same opportunity to the coworkers. I didn't want them to have this perception that only the boss could do that and we had to be, you know, the coworkers that stayed in the office all day. So I really encouraged that and supported that to everybody. And I would say to those of you that are in an environment where you have approached a boss or the CEO about what are their views on you being involved and getting involved in the community, and if they're not real high on that, maybe you need to rethink if you're in the best position at that company. And if you're young and you're interviewing for a new job, I think that's one of the questions you should ask that employer is, how do you feel about if I want to be involved in the community with this, this, or this? And if they're like, you know what, that's not a real high priority for us, well then maybe you need to rethink about going to work for them.
Any more questions? Well, we still got a little bit more time, but I'm going to bring this to a close. But before I do, I want to take a split second from each of you guys and tell us if, as we're walking away, because we've gotten a great deal of information, and it's, as I say to everyone, I've seen so many people taking notes, but not just taking notes, but decide what you can put in action. Not tomorrow, but what can you take action on today that will help you as you go forward. But I want to ask the presenters to give us one last tip. If we don't hear anything else that you're saying today, give us that one last tip that's going to stick into our heads as we leave away to help us advance our leadership roles. Debbie? Did I cut? I'm sorry.
Care. That's all. You know, you can't be a good leader unless you care, and you can't fake it.
I think Debbie said this earlier, and it is my core belief that if I was going to give you some definitions, for me, the definition of leadership is influence. And you have to build and protect your influence. Influence is like a currency. It is like the aloe plant. It is something you have to create and protect and build and create and protect. And then second definition I would give you is that the definition of listening is understanding. If you don't understand, it means you did not listen well.
Passion. That's my word for the day. And if you're not passionate about what you do, as I said earlier, go find something that you can be passionate about.
Okay, well, I want you guys to join me one last time in thanking our speakers. They've done a magnificent job. The questions that we threw at them right on the spot, because we didn't prep you guys with questions. It was great stuff that we can walk away with and put into action. So please, let's give our presenters a round of applause. And thank you guys. Thank you guys for getting up early this morning and coming out and hearing on how to advance through leadership. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you guys' expertise, and we hope to see you again at our next crash course session in June. I need water. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Guys, you are awesome. You're right.